Today we're talking about Ruth Ozeki, The Book of Form and Emptiness. I got this book from a colleague of mine who was like getting rid of some books, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And then 3 of my colleagues jumped in and they were like, oh, we wanted to. But I got it first because I stayed on it. But I quite like the idea of like passing books on, so I will definitely make sure all my colleagues get it too. I really like the little book libraries that you have at like train stations where you like take a book and give a book, that sort of thing. So I really love that. Funnily enough, when I first saw the title of the book, I kind of thought it was more like a self-help type of book, but that's not what the book is at all. So the book is about Benny. Benny's father dies in a tragic accident, and following his death, his mom becomes a hoarder. And Benny himself starts hearing objects talk to him. So like pencils and shoes and things. They just start talking to him. And the book is basically about his journey of navigating his new reality of things are talking to him, dealing with the mental health services, as well as dealing with his mother, who's got a hoarding problem, and the grief for his father, obviously. It's like first love and that sort of thing. He's 14 years old. So my thoughts about the book. First of all, my ratings. I gave it a 4-star. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I've ever read a book like this, because within the book is a book. So the book is a book that talks about itself. So it's a little bit of an Inception-y type idea. So essentially the book is present within the book and talks about how it is part of Benny's life and how it talks to Benny and how it narrates Benny's life, and Benny and the book have like conversations with each other, and the book will talk about itself as well. And I've never read a book like this. It's Inception, but I found it really, really interesting and really a novel thing. I do think the novelty did wear off towards the end. And the book was less present towards the end as well. But initially it was definitely something that made me go, oh, okay, that's a bit different. I think what I would say is that it's hard to say because the book is about Benny and it's Benny's book. But the book did like sometimes have full on like arguments with Benny. But the book also wouldn't push Benny too much on things where maybe a person would have pushed him, say. The book also deals with some really interesting themes around like overconsumption and people's need to incessantly consume stuff, which is obviously super trendy because at the moment there's like this whole underconsumption trend going on. It also talks a little bit about obviously mental health, and you kind of wonder to yourself like, is he really hearing things talking to himself, or is he legitimately mentally ill? And that question doesn't really ever get answered. And there's also a little bit of his mother. When she's doing the hoarding, she also kind of almost feels things speaking to her, but in a very different way. So I found that very interesting as an exploration. Obviously, deals with the grief of losing a parent, which was very interesting. Just in general, it was a really, really interesting book. I really enjoyed reading it. I do think I enjoyed it more in the beginning than I did towards the end. I think the book became a little bit less about the initial themes, the overconsumption and that, and it became more about Benny and his love troubles and being a teenager and things like that, which became then more a coming of age story rather than a story about the initial themes of the book. So I feel like it departed a little bit from that, but I did definitely enjoy it, and I think it's definitely worth reading. And now that I've done my initial thing, I do have some quotes from the book to just illustrate some of the themes. So I'm just going to read those. So feel free to like skip off if you don't want to hear. But I just found them quite interesting. So this is actually a really nice quote. I really like the way lovemaking is described here, and the way that it describes a woman. When she was naked, he backed away and gazed at her. She stood there, uncertain, framed by a window that seemed to hold her in place. Outside, the light from a street lamp shone through the gauzy curtains and turned her creamy skin pearlescent. She waited for him to indicate something, pleasure or displeasure, and when he didn't, her hands moved to cover her breasts and groin. He felt his breath catch. She was magnificent, standing in a pool of cheap aquamarine satin and dingy lace. She looked like Botticelli's Venus. Ugh, I can't say that word. Let me just say that sentence again. Standing in the pool of cheap aquamarine satin and dingy lace, she looked like Botticelli's Venus, stepping from the waves, or was it a clamshell? He couldn't recall, but she was certainly the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. I don't think I've ever seen a description of a woman, and this is Benny's mom being described, and she does gain weight later on, but I think it's described quite early on that she was always like heavier, certainly than Benny's father. And I just think that that description of maybe a curvier woman is just the most beautiful description I've ever read in a book, and just the way it was described was just beautiful to me. This quote is a bit where the book is talking to itself, or to us, I suppose. And I really like this quote because it kind of talks almost about the way that we colonize things. It's very interesting. Wait for the quote. We too have been the slaves of your desires, unwitting tools forging the destruction of the planet. And things will change, whether you like it or not. In the end days of the Anthropocene, your words, your hubris, not ours. Matter is making a comeback. We are taking our bodies, reclaiming our material selves. In a neo-materialistic world, everything matters. And then it says, sorry, that turned into a rant. No reader likes a rant. As a book, we should know better. But I really like the way it like talks about books being slaves and things like that. I just thought that was very interesting. Right, this quote is actually like a quote of somebody else, which was Herbert Hoover, who was appointed by President Coolidge to find answers to economical questions. And he published this conclusion, apparently. I don't know how true this is. This is all in the book. The survey has proved conclusively what has long been held theoretically to be true, that wants are almost insatiable, that one want satisfied makes way for another. The conclusion is that economically we have a boundless field before us, that there are new wants which will make way endlessly for newer ones as fast as they are satisfied. And I just thought that was really, it just speaks so much, I think, to our current world and the overconsumption that's present in our current world, and some of the things that are probably going wrong with our world at the moment, because we do seem never satisfied. So yeah, quote actually is very lovely. Basically throughout the book there is a presence of a woman who is a Zen monk, a Japanese Zen monk, who wrote a book about tidying up and like getting rid of unnecessary like items and decluttering, basically. And this is a quote from her previous Zen master, who said to her, "You are perfect, just as you are. And two, you could lose..." Ugh. I'm going to say this again. I'm going to edit this out because I cannot read, apparently. You are perfect, just as you are. And two, you could use a little improvement. And I just really love that quote. It's a very body positive quote, because I'm very big into body positivity and all that. And something that I always try and make people understand is that body positivity does not mean that you think you are the most gorgeous person in the world. It just means that you love and you appreciate your body the way it looks right now. But it doesn't mean that your body couldn't do any improvements, or that we as people can't be improved. And I always believe in a continuous way of learning, and the way that people should always strive to be better today than what they were yesterday, as people. So I just really like that quote, and I think that is a really lovely quote to end it on, because yeah, I think the themes of this book are really interesting. It certainly makes you think about things you could do in your own life to improve your own life, and how to be better. So Ruth Ozeki, The Book of Form and Emptiness. Definitely a good read. Would certainly recommend. Give it a shot.